Hey folks, this is Waylon Lewis, and I am here with Leora Frankel, and thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you.
This is Facebook Live, so as usual, it's incredibly live and unedited, and we're sharing this to our almost all of our 60 pages with our 5 million Facebook fans, which is huge, and you can just talk straight to me, and it's just a conversation. So what did you do recently, and why are you here?
So I published a guest column in the Boulder Weekly regarding money in the role money is playing in our current city elections, city council elections in Boulder.
So people may know Boulder just because they know it from something, but just very recently we were named happiest town yet again in the whole world, I think, or at least in the US, in National Geographic. And I think The Guardian did a similar piece, or Daily Mail or someone. So historically, say the last couple of decades, how long have you lived here?
Since 2002.
2002. So what are the ingredients in your mind, I can add some, that have made us this happy, successful experiment of a town?
So it's the size. I think 100,000 is a kind of this nice sweet spot for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
It's
small,
it's
you
small
know
enough,
everyone,
exactly.
But it's not too boring. It's big enough.
Yeah, and unlike a lot of towns, I think, or cities that are 100,000 people, we have a great university. We have all these government institutions like NOAA and NIST and NCAR. So we have a very
Those are all these big science labs that study things like climate change or whatever.
Exactly.
Pretty nationally prominent. We have IBM out there.
Right. Very educated population, very creative population, great startups, also food has been really big in the food creative activity.
Entrepreneur of the Year in 2007 in National Boulder, right here.
Oh, really?
Even though we don't make food, but we talk about it. Yeah.
Cycling, great bike paths, the mountains here, obviously, the trails, the open space, fantastic views.
So open space, for those who don't know, is we kind of like Portland and even places like, I was just a couple years ago in Firenze in Florence in Italy. There's this huge ring of nature and farms around the city of Boulder. And we did that intentionally. Deliberate development for decades, whether it's the closing traffic on the Pearl Street Mall or buying up open space, so it's not just sprawl, sprawl, sprawl. But what's the danger of any successful, popular city that tries to contain a certain amount of development?
Well, rising housing prices, there's probably a bunch of factors here, but yes, it's because it's extreme demand.
Yeah.
Very, very popular city. So
same in Denver, same in Fort Collins. The Front Range is one of the most popular places in terms of people moving and growing. So prices have gone from, my parents, I mean, you have to adjust for inflation and all that, but they bought a house for $75,000. It was very simple, one story on 21st and Mapleton in 1976 or something. And that same exact house now, sadly, they didn't hold on to it for long enough, but they sold it for $150,000, is now $1 million plus.
And that's typical.
Yeah, and that's quite typical now for downtown Boulder. And by downtown, I mean most of the city of Boulder, much of it. So affordability is a real crisis. And I think so we have an election coming up, and it's already happening actually, with the mail-in and drop-off ballots. So you just wrote this big it's almost like an expose. It's not straight journalism because you're not working for the Weekly, and it's not just a editorial opinion comment. It involves a ton of research. How much time did you put into that thing?
I estimate 70 to 80 hours in 1 week because it had to be done quickly.
Yeah.
It's very tiring, actually. Yeah.
So, yeah, I really appreciated that piece, and I wanted you to come in here. And a lot of my friends on the other side, I'm endorsing kind of a mix of candidates, but primarily I'm looking for people who will keep Boulder weird. That's what the hat says, or make Boulder weird again. It's a little riff off Trump. But, who will continue our weird values, where we have the strong business community almost because everyone wants to live here because it's bikeable and there's fun restaurants. Because it's such a weird town, people want to live here. The mix of communities, climbing, science, tech, startup, natural products that you touched on. So what did you discover and what were the main points of your article?
Well, the article is about, I think I said that's how money, how wealth is converted or money is converted into political power in Boulder. Right. And I started noticing this a couple of years ago, especially last year though. And I was surprised that it hadn't been covered properly by the daily newspaper here. And I kept waiting to see an article explaining what was going on. And I never saw that article. So I decided to try to explore it myself.
Yeah, so I grew up with the Boulder Daily Camera. I was intern there for like a day once, which was fun. Not an intern, but you know, I got to like learn from them. And my next door neighbor was one of their leading columnists, and it's a beloved institution. It's been bought and no longer independent a few times, and like almost all local journalism in the U.S., it's been decimated with cuts because of, you know, the rise of people reading for free online and all that. So the camera in some ways is a lot, they have less firepower than they used to. They probably, you know, have one person assigned to 8 stories instead of 8 people assigned to 36 stories or something. So they haven't looked into it as much. There's other factors where, you know, they seem to enjoy making fun of Boulder, which we all do, but they do it almost with like a, and I'm talking about Dave Krieger specifically, almost with a editorial satisfaction that's not always helpful for the community. So they egg on controversies like the right sizing instead of being a forum space for people to agree or disagree agreeably. That's my personal take. And by no means am I unappreciative of the camera as a whole, but I do think Krieger and some of the role it's played has been more about clicks and less about community than it could be. So in the absence of a lot of some paper creating that forum, I appreciated your article. There was an article today by Alex Burness of The Camera that in some ways was a response to your article. How did you take that? Did you agree with it? Did you disagree with it? Was it fair reporting?
I was pleased that the cameras finally addressed this issue.
Yeah.
The first part of the article made a lot of sense. Just tried to look at Engage Boulder and Open Boulder, these two organizations that are pretty much run by the same people, it seems.
So just to explain, so there's Engage Boulder, there's Open Boulder, there's Better Boulder, there's Plan Boulder, which is historically one of the most powerful groups, more environmentalist types. There's, what else is there? There's New Era Colorado, there's Elephant in a very small way. There's a ton of organizations that all want to have influence, and there's a ton of individuals, most of them well-connected community-wise or rich or both, who want to have some influence.
Well, yeah, I want to correct. I shouldn't say it was run by the same people, but there's a group of people who are trying to get some desired outcomes, and there's some overlap between the people in those groups.
Sure.
Anyway, so the camera covered that part of it pretty well, explaining that nobody knows who the donors are because these are 501c4s, and yeah.
I'm just seeing if there's a comment, sorry.
Right, so that nobody knows, just explaining why 501c4s, what their rights are legally. And again, my article wasn't necessarily talking about any illegal activity. So the camera also tried to distinguish, I think, between the fact that money is dark in the sense that it's a 501c4 and you don't know who the donors are, and illegal activity. I think they did a fairly good job in the first part of the article.
So let's touch on that. So what's the difference between, because this may sound boring, but this is literally free and fair elections at stake. What's the difference between 501c3 and C4?
Oh, I am not the right person to ask
I can touch on it. So
you.
C3s have to be very clear and very literal about who is giving what. There's usually $100 caps, I think. Other people know more than me. And the names of donors are all public. And C4s can advocate for general issues, but not specific candidates, but they can kind of get away with saying, we support Waylon, we think you should support him. They can't say vote for me. They can't, there's certain words they can't say. And the donors don't have to disclose their names or the amounts.
Well, let's take a step back. So Boulder's had these election campaign finance laws since 1999.
Which is a national model for transparency and keeping money relatively contained.
That's right. Since then, there's been a Supreme Court decision. Since Citizen United happened, I think, after that. And in 2012, there was a Colorado Supreme Court decision. Mm. That Supreme Court decision about which words could be, what exactly is meant by express advocacy. Express advocacy is a term which is very, very important in campaign finance law, because anything that is express advocacy is governed by campaign finance law, and anything that is not express advocacy falls outside of campaign finance law. So again, being very technical, but the 2012 Colorado Supreme Court decision said, look, there are these magic words. Magic words are vote for or elect. Johnny for council, and so, pretty much anything that doesn't fall under these words can be, no matter how obvious it is that it's a call to elect somebody, a candidate, that is not a form of express advocacy. So going back to Boulder's election laws, campaign finance laws, they're outdated. Everybody now agrees they're outdated, but they're extreme because of these Supreme Court, these decisions. But until recently, until this year, everybody abided by them pretty much. So that means that the candidates can opt for matching funds, raise up to $10,000, get another $10,000 in public funds, and that is it. You can then have unofficial candidate committees also raising money to promote those candidates. They are all limited to maximum $100 per person or per entity. This has been that has been abided by despite the rulings until now. You suddenly have lawyers brought in who are advising these organizations, Engage Boulder and I think Open Boulder, and telling them, look, actually yes, both of them, look, there are these great loopholes. We have ways of spending limitless funds to promote our slate. But it's only one side doing this.
But so I think a lot of people in Boulder and that Daily Camera article seem to say both sides are doing it.
Not with candidates. This is where the candidates and the issues are good. There's candidate committees, there's issue committees. There's unofficial candidate committees, unofficial, I don't know if it's unofficial, but issues committees. And there's always been obscene amounts of money spent on issues. That's how Excel could come in and try to fight the municipalization of our electric system. That's how last year when you had all these nice moms trying to prevent, their kids from getting soft drinks, wanted the soda tax, right? That's why Coca-Cola, PepsiCo, whoever it was, could come in, and don't quote me on exactly which soft drink company, but it's basically those kinds of companies could come in and also spend huge amounts of money.
So what are Open and Engage doing that the other side, and I think getting too much into the buying into the notion of size is sad for Boulder, because everyone has their own views, and people can support co-ops, can support candidates who may not. I support co-ops, and I am largely endorsing a slate of candidates who are ambivalent about that issue. So what is one side doing that the other side is not?
They are supporting candidates, people who eventually will be our elected officials, who will make decisions for all of us. They're supporting them with funds that are not reported, that are from unknown donors. That is what they're doing. Now, the only example in the Camera article that was remotely close to that was when they said, and I don't know if this is true or not, it may be true, that Plan Boulder had some sort of campaign materials that combined funding from their issue committee, which must be for pro-muni, with their candidate committee.
Right.
You're not supposed to mix funds from the two. If that is correct, that there's one piece of material out there, it may be, they shouldn't have done that if that's true. Right. But what we're talking about here is on such a large scale, what's happening with Open Boulder and Engage Boulder.
So
and
large
it's so
scale.
Intentional.
Let's talk about that. So if both sides are doing similar things, there's still, from the sort of whole Plan Boulder side, they're saying, well, it's so far beyond on the other side. I keep hearing $100,000 in dark money. Is that a real number, or anything close to that?
Well, Steve Fenberg listed everything last night or the night before on your Facebook page. He's our state senator. Did a fantastic job in explaining that there's mailers, stickers, text messages, live phone bank. I mean, the list just goes on and on. Obviously, employees, marketing guys.
Yeah.
I would be so surprised if we haven't reached 100,000. We did look into how much the mailings would cost, just the 2 mailings, and that's how we got to, I think, at least 15,000 for the daily camera ads, full-page daily camera ads. We did do the math up to the point where my article came out, but now that we've added in all these other issues, I would be very surprised if we're not close to 100.
So taking the larger view and including everyone who doesn't live in Boulder, we have a ton of people watching right now who probably aren't in Boulder. Let's make you queen for the day, and anything you say comes true. How would you make sure that this, and particularly the next election cycles, were more fair? What changes would you make?
I would hope to see a very brave city attorney and a very brave city council take the kind of position that we saw when, for instance, Trump tried to halt the immigration process from 7 countries. You saw attorney generals in some states just stand up and see how far can we defend what is right.
Right.
And Boulder should show the way. It should have the best legal advice as to how to restructure or reword our campaign finance laws so as to get around Citizen United or the 2012 Colorado Supreme Court decision.
Right. So we've had a couple conservative decisions, as you outlined, that have pushed back on our once great campaign finance laws, and we need new laws with the same spirit as our old laws to address and handle and in some ways get around Citizens United and the Colorado law. Is that what you're saying, basically?
I'm saying that. I'm also saying that the candidates who are benefiting from this, they're receiving $10,000 each in matching funds while also benefiting from these other organizations' just unlimited spending.
Mm.
I think they should speak up. I think they should express their concern about this. Maybe they should disavow their endorsements. Maybe they should tell their endorsers to stop doing this. I think they should find a backbone, honestly.
Yeah, so I like that point because I think that gets beyond sides. So like I'm personal friends, I hope, still with Bill Rigler. I'm endorsing Jill. She's endorsed or not endorsed on various slates. I mean, all of us on whatever side should want free and fair elections free meaning liberty, not free, because some money has to be involved. This shouldn't be about sides, right? Everyone should want to play ball fairly and have a good time. Right?
Definitely. I think that was what Boulder did for decades, and I hope we get back to that. Right.
So I guess the larger thing which we could talk about is sort of the gentrification of Boulder at this point. I talk to a lot of people who would support the sort of environmental, social issue candidates, but they're just so dismayed. They say Boulder's over, it's too expensive, I'm moving, I'm leaving, I'm not voting, whatever. There's a lot of people have kind of given up on Boulder because houses are $1 million or whatever. And I always say, well, there's a ton of, that may be all true, but there's a ton of, well, there's not a ton, there's a limited number of huge opportunities in Boulder to create beautiful developments like Spark that include affordability, that are green built, that include artist studios or whatever, that are mixed use and creative and maybe involve some co-housing. So I guess all I'm saying for myself, I don't know if you have any disagreement or agreement, but is that Boulder is worth fighting for, and hopefully not fighting, but, because I've been pretty proud on my Facebook wall seeing Will Tour and Fenberg and Congressman Polis and all kinds of different, Michelle Estrella, Brady Robinson, all kinds of people with different points of view, Bill Rigler, discussing and often fighting at first, but then very quickly it becomes more civil. And I think that's a wonderful example. So how do we, maybe bring it back to you, sorry I'm blabbing, just had coffee at the cup. How do we, in your mind, make things more civil, fundamentally?
That's tough. That's tough because this is a really polarized election.
Yeah.
And
it's not just about being polite. Like, part of what I like about your piece is it isn't polite. It really goes after the issues. But at the same time, in my mind, it represented a lot of good journalism. And I wanted to get questions. I asked all the people I just mentioned if they had questions for you. I mean, a lot of them were on the other side, quote unquote, were just saying everyone's doing it. That seems to be the general kind of feeling, that both sides are muddy.
Well, because I did write to you, I think it's a false equivalency. I'm sure both sides have said things they shouldn't say and hurt each other and insulted each other. But as far as the role of money, which is really what my article's about,
right,
it's not the same story. And I think that's part of why this election has become so polarized. I think if you just had people disagreeing about the height of the buildings or the nature of transportation or maximum population, I think it would be a more civil discourse. Right.
Yeah, we can, and we have to come back to that nationally as well as locally, be agreeable in our disagreements, as Senator Udall used to always say. Well, I thank you for the article. I hope there's some sort of follow-up based on all the questions, but I hope the Weekly and the Camera and everyone gets more involved, not less. And I hope we find another daily, we have a daily paper playing an active role.
Can I say
Boulder.
one more thing?
Please, you can say anything you want.
Can say anything. That's fine. I wanted to make something clear about the article, because obviously it has stirred up quite a bit of, let's say, discourse.
A lot of discourse, a lot of other stuff too.
The article is, as you said, it's an opinion column, and it's there. It has a narrative. When people say, "Why did you include," let's say, Jared Paulus?
Yeah.
It's because it's a narrative article. It's not in order to say, to point fingers necessarily at this or that. But there was another reason, and I do want to apologize if Jared Paulus felt he didn't get his fair chance. Although I did reach out. And
yeah, you reached out twice.
I reached out to both communications directors.
I think as Steve and Jared himself said, his place in that narrative, while kind of convenient, he's a tech guy, he's super wealthy, is also not exactly part of that narrative in the sense that he is also an environmentalist and progressive on social issues, and he's endorsing people from not just one side as well.
I'm gonna say something that is a little bit controversial, but Please. It was there in the article, and that's Please. I want to explain that there was there's the surface level, and there's, from my perspective, kind of a subtext.
Yeah. And
the subtext is, what does it mean to be a progressive today? And I was a huge Bernie fan. I'm proud of that. Mm-hmm. And I sat there at the phone bank at CU with CU students, and in many ways, my article was directed at them. My article is like, if you truly believe that money shouldn't play a role in these elections, if you truly have Bernie's voice in the back of your head, then be an informed voter. See where the money's coming from. See who's trying to get their guys on council.
Right.
Because my natural sort of sympathies are towards this young generation that still has hope and still believes that democracy is possible.
It's amazing to me seeing a lot of my young environmentalist progressive friends are endorsing candidates on the sort of what I view as largely the kind of moneyed side. And I think a lot of them are doing so because of, in some way, they feel like Plan is out of touch now. They're just they always call Plan NIMBY, not in my backyard. That Plan is against co-ops, which nothing could be more progressive than a genuine co-op. And I've asked Sue Prant and Zane and others, well, if they're well defined, there shouldn't be an issue here. We don't want a frat house or landlords to just be renting to 12 people. But I think all of us who are progressive and weird want genuine co-ops. I'm right next door to Masala, and they're great neighbors. And so I do think Plan is a bit out of touch on that. And it's just saying no to everything isn't going to work. On the other hand, do we want to become a town with 250,000 people, as Zane has discussed? That will help affordability. It will change obviously, the character of Boulder, to put it lightly. So we have real decisions, and we need civil discourse to think that out.
I think that young generation, they have natural allies. If they could hear a message from a guy in his 70s who's talking like an old socialist,
right.
There's a lot of people in the neighborhoods who are their natural allies, and right. I'm hoping they know that.
I don't know if they do. I mean, I've been active in local politics for many years, and I have many, many friends who are active in Plan and other communities, but I don't think I've ever been to a Plan meeting or been invited, or they haven't really cultivated a younger generation, I think, and I think they need to do so.
So I'm not on Plan. I haven't been to a Plan meeting. I'm talking more about just the grassroots movement that is genuine going on in the neighborhoods.
Right. And so on any side, just the real grassroots progressive movement. Yeah.
And I have a 21-year-old son who's a senior at Mines, and he's really interested in politics. When I talk to him and his friends, that's I just feel we share the same ideals, and if they could just take a look and see that the dividing line is between people who are progressing their business interests by getting people on council versus just really ordinary people trying to figure things out. Not always right, but there is a big difference.
Yeah, and that's something I think Lisa Morzell, who's been term limited out now, thanks to our voting to take away our own right to vote, at the behest of Open Boulder and others who pushed the term limits thing. She said she always served and loved serving with folks who had very different opinions, and they were always able to work together and find common issues, and it was fun. And she said that has gone away in council now. There's a real lack of ability to work together on council that she saw for the first time. And I think the real way for all of us on whatever side we think we're on is to reject the kind of Trumpian tweeting at people thing and really engage in dialogue. And I've invited Alex Burness to do a video. I invite anyone in their and my limited time. I've met with Eric Budd, who I am not endorsing, but who I respect on some issues like transportation and co-ops and development overall. But, I think we can all kind of get out of the sides dialogue a little bit and reach across the aisle.
Yeah, so, You said you wanted me to be transparent about my vote.
Please, yes.
Voting? Or?
People repeatedly said, only a couple people, but on the Open Boulder Engaged side, they were like, well, Leora's donated to whoever.
It's true.
Yeah.
I have made donations. And this was an opinion piece. I don't know really if, as a journalist, you can never make donations, but I wasn't working as a hired reporter. This was an opinion column.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm really happy.
And it was framed as such in the weekly. It was not framed as straight journalism.
I was amused that it was referred to as pulp fiction. I actually found that really funny. Well, it tells a story, and it's based on facts, but it's
well, I teach journalism in a new media context, and it's a common misconception that journalism has to be objective in the sense of false equivalencies. Climate change may be real, or it may not. We're not sure.
That's the best example.
Climate change, journalism is only loyal to facts, and maybe you left out some, maybe some were incorrect, then people can respond, then you can address those, other people can address them. But journalism should tell a story. The best journalists always have a voice, and it can be personal, and it can have passion. If you look at Edward R. Murrow and the McCarthy episode in our history, thank God for journalism. So, or thank the Constitution for journalism.
We'd be lost without it.
Yeah. So thank you for bringing some voice into discussion, and I hope those who agree and disagree, if they're still listening after 28 minutes. Yeah, do you have more to?
Well, do you want me to mention the candidates?
Please.
Yeah, just
and maybe say why.
Okay.
So who did you endorse or donate to?
Well, I can just say who I'm voting for, or do you want me to try to remember who I...
Whatever you like. My response to the donation charge was, well, I'm sure they're small donations. I'm sure they're not thousands of dollars, right?
Well, the maximum is 100.
Right, and that's exactly how elections should work. People should donate. I donated to a at least one candidate, Sam Weaver, and that might have been it, actually. And I should have donated to Jill if I didn't, but
yeah, I donated to Mirabai Nagel and to Cindy Carlisle. Those were the two I donated to.
Nice.
And I endorsed Sam Weaver as kind of by chance in a very roundabout way, but my name did appear there, and I endorsed him. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know if anybody wants my endorsement after my controversial article. I get the feeling that people are
well, people want to know.
Distance.
Just transparency is always helpful.
Yeah, but the candidates, I think, are all very cautious right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't hold Leora's endorsements or mine against the candidates.
I'm not sure they're helpful right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's great. Well, thank you for your time. And I will say I asked many people on both sides for comment and questions to ask you, and very few people were willing to say anything even privately to me. So I appreciate your bravery and your willingness to come forward and talk.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
and
much.
Good luck, Boulder.
Thanks.
All right.